The Story of the Pilgrims by Catherine Ross. Once upon a time, in the land of England, there lived a small group of people called Pilgrims. The Pilgrims were unhappy because the King of England would not let them worship God in their own way. So the Pilgrims packed up their belongings and said a tearful goodbye to their homes and their friends in the world they knew. On a mild day in autumn, they set sail for a new world called America, which was across the wide ocean. Other families came along. Together they hoped to find freedom and a better life. More than 100 people squeezed into a small wooden sailing ship called the Mayflower. 22 of the Pilgrims were children. For their journey, they brought with them only the simplest foods, things like hard cheese, bread, dried beans, and salted meat. Day after day, the Pilgrims saw nothing but the endless ocean and sky. Now and then, the huge slippery body of a whale would break the surface of the water. On and on they sailed through calm days and stormy ones, until, after 66 days at sea, they heard the words they had been dreaming of for so long. Land ho! Nearer and nearer to the land they sailed, until the water was so shallow they could go no further. They dropped anchor in a peaceful bowl-shaped harbor rimmed with sparkling white sand. Dense woods rose up all around. There were no towns, no houses. There was no sign of any people at all. The Pilgrims rowed ashore to explore the wild lands so full of mystery and promise. The men were armed with guns. They had heard that America was full of fierce animals and savage Indians. After many days of exploring up and down the coast, they found a deep harbor near good farmland. Here they would make their home. They called it Plymouth. While some stood guard against Indians, the others began to build houses. The first was long and low and very plain. They called it the common house, for they would all share it. As each day grew a little colder and a little darker, they worked quickly. Winter was coming. And a terrible winter it was. There were dark days of bleak and bitter cold, far colder than any they had known back in England. Snow and sleet and high winds battered the common house and the little ship anchored in the harbor. The Pilgrims huddled together for warmth, trying to survive on stale food from the long voyage. Many of them became sick and died. By the time spring came, there were only 50 Pilgrims alive, and they were mostly children. What would they do if Indians attacked? Surely they would be too weak to fight back. Then one day an Indian did come. The Pilgrims had never seen an Indian this close, and they were terrified. But the Indian had come in peace. His name was Samoset. After a few days later, more Indians marched to their village, 60 of them, led by a warrior chief. The Pilgrims and the Indians made a treaty, promising not only to do each other no harm, but also to help each other. An Indian named Squanto turned out to be a special friend. He taught the Pilgrims many things: where to find the best fish and how to stomp eels out of mud at low tide, how to find their way safely through the dark forest, and where to find nuts and berries and wild herbs. And Squanto taught the Pilgrims how to plant a wonderful new food. It was called corn. Each seed mound they buried a small fish to help the corn grow. At that first summer in the New World, the Pilgrims fished and hunted and tended their crops. They built more houses to live in and sheds in which to store their supplies. The children worked and explored and played with their new simple toys. When autumn came, the Pilgrims rejoiced over their harvest, bright ears of corn and fat pumpkins, peas, beans, delicious squash, and green herbs. They felt so happy about their good fortune that they wanted to celebrate. They knew they could never have survived without the Indians, so the Pilgrims invited the Indians to join them in a feast. 90 Indians came. For 3 days and nights, the Pilgrim and the Indians ate and drank and danced and played games together. To remember that time so long ago, a time of brave pilgrims and life-saving Indians, we continue to celebrate the feast. We call it Thanksgiving.